Sorry.
Today is Gechunjul.
German? I'm American. Yeah, so
I'm Russian.
I'm Russian.
It's okay. Yes, now, today is Gechunjul, the opening of Heaven Day, the day that heaven opened. There's kind of the idea that heaven is usually closed, meaning that heavenly spirits don't usually come down here to earth and we cannot access up to there. All right. The heaven opening day, what's that about? The idea is, by current modern calculations, in 2333 BC. 2333 BC, which makes this 4351 on the Korean calendar. 4,351 this year. You'll see that on the banners when we get up there. They proclaim that year. Okay, now back then, the first king of the first Korean kingdom founded the kingdom, started the kingdom. The story is, up in heaven, the Lord of heaven, there's an emperor of heaven. It's not like the Christian idea, which seems really, really strange to Asian people. In Asia, it's like the emperor down here on earth, the emperor of heaven. He's got a wife, he's got, in fact, many wives. He's got children, he has many children, he's got a whole royal court up there. The whole Christian idea of, a single man alone up there in the sky just never made sense to them. Where is the wife? Why doesn't he have a wife? He's God. He can have anything he wants. Anyway, so here, the Lord of heaven. Yes, he has anything. He has a full royal court going, and many wives, and many sons. Many sons. And one of his younger sons comes to him and says, "Father, I want to leave. I want to go out." Now, it's significant. It's a younger son. It's not, the oldest son. The older sons, they're important. Crown prince, they're important. They have a job in heaven. They're going to succeed their father, and the top level princes, they have important jobs. This is a younger son, but maybe somebody intelligent with ability and leadership, but he's a younger son. He's got no job. He's got 12 older brothers. He got nothing to do in his future. You can imagine in real kingdoms, it really worked like that at times. And then the younger son might want to leave and make his own kingdom. He told his father, "I want to go to the earth and make a kingdom there on earth." Strange, but okay. His father approved. Said, "Yes, you can go. You got nothing to do here. You're a good kid. Go make your own kingdom." The Father, the Lord of heaven, surveyed the earth, looked down upon the earth, and chose the perfect mountain, the greatest mountain, the Taebaeksan, as Koreans call it, Taebaeksan, the grand white mountain. Now understand that the color white is very holy and religious to the Koreans, always has been. They prefer to wear white clothing. White is the color of purity. Just start noticing in the advertising in the subway. Look at the ads. All the people wearing white clothing, sitting on white furniture, white carpet, white drapes in the background, especially in like selling an air conditioner. Everything in the photo is white, including the aircon unit itself. This is the Korean ideal of excellence. Nobody's apartment actually looks like that. Hardly anybody actually decorates their apartment in all white, but in the advertising, if you take a look, you'll see that. And all the pop stars and celebrities dressed in white clothing and with perfectly white skin and using those, skin whitening lotions, as you always see. They're really big on this, and they always have been. The very first written record we have of the Korean people is from China when the Han Dynasty invaded in 100 BC, invaded this area, and a scholar went with them to record about the barbarian peoples of the Northeast. And when they came to this peninsula in what is now North Korea, and so this scholar wrote, "These people love to wear white clothing and their religious ornaments are white, and they love singing. They love to sing. That's all he wrote, and that's the first record we have of the Korean people of any sort, that they love white and they love to sing. And both of those things are still true. He did not mention the heavy drinking, but probably because in Northeast Asia that's really pretty common. Not something that stood out as a distinctive thing. Anyway, so this mountain is called the Grand White Mountain. Different term, great or big, but grand, more than great, the supreme white mountain. There's no such particular mountain. However, there is one mountain here in South Korea with that name. It got that name later because of this myth, but it's located, it's called Tae. It's the newest national park. It used to be a provincial park. It's on the east coast near Gangwon. And right now, this morning, right on the peak of that peak, they're having a big ceremony for Dangun, similar to the one we are about to see right here. They're having that on the peak. It's the 7th highest peak of South Korea. Very dramatic. Please look at my website and see Taebaeksan for that. Now, nobody ever thought that that's really the original Taebaeksan, but it just works that way symbolically for South Korea. Everybody thought the real Taebaeksan was in what is now North Korea. The one who wrote this story down, the version that we have, was in the 1200s. In the 1200s is the written record of this story I am telling you right now, and he said it was Mount Myeonghyangsan, which is north of Pyongyang, and he's a very famous holy mountain of North Korea, and a big Buddhist temple there, a tourist site and such. However, in the 20th century, in the early 20th century, Koreans started to decide that Baekdusan is Taebaeksan. Baekdusan, the big volcano mountain of North Korea, the giant volcano that's right on the border of North Korea and China. Actually, China owns most of it. The Koreans just have a sliver of it. Mao Zedong stole half of it from Kim Il-sung during the Korean War. But that giant mountain, that's the holy mountain now of the Korean people, and most Korean people will tell you that this story happened at that mountain, Baekdusan, and that's the reason why just a week ago, 10 days ago, whatever, President Moon was in North Korea and with Kim Jong-un climbed to the peak of that mountain and stood posing together again with the lake in the background, the volcano lake on the peak of that mountain, nearly 3,000 meters high. That's why they were there, is this story. The belief that this is the origin of the Korean nation. It's how Korea started. And then the myth that Kim Jong-un, the fat boy now, that his grandfather fought the Japanese on that mountain, fought against the Japanese army and had great victories against the Japanese on that mountain, and then gave birth to his son Kim Jong-il, the second North Korean dictator, born on that volcano mountain. And therefore he's holy, he's infused with the spirit, and now the boy, he's called with the Baekdu bloodline from Baekdusan. They call him Baekdu bloodline because his father was born at that mountain. This is totally, again, myth. That's also a myth. The father, Kim Jong-il, the second dictator, was actually born in Russia. And his father was in Russia on a Russian army base in Khabarovsk. We know this. We have the Russian records. We know about the birth. Everything. He was born up there. He did not fight the Japanese on the slopes of that mountain. There were no such battles. There were no Japanese at that mountain. Through most of Korean history, that mountain has just been wilderness. It's surrounded by great wilderness. There's no historic town there. There's not even a single Buddhist temple at that mountain anywhere close to it. It's just wilderness full of bears and tigers. No human being that we know of hardly ever climbed that mountain in all of history. Really remote area. Koreans only really came to know about it even during the Joseon Dynasty, just to have knowledge of it. And only in the 20th century did anybody really visit there and climb to the peak and take any photos and such. So anyway, total myth. From North Korea, solid, absolutely claims to believe that myth, and they built a log cabin on the slopes of the mountain, and they say that's the house where Kim Jong-il was born, and the guerrilla camp where they were fighting. They have all the battlefield places. It's all totally artificial and set up, but they believe this, and they need to believe it, that it's the same mountain from this myth today that is the origin of the North Korean dictatorship, that it's their bloodline is infused with the spirit of that mountain, the Sanchin, the mountain spirit, which I've already mentioned, and the mountain spirit of this mountain being very strong. Aha! You see, ties together. Oh yeah, now, we're back. Okay, the Emperor of Heaven, the Lord of Heaven, he surveys the earth. He chooses Taebaeksan, the grand white mountain, and his son. They open the gate of heaven. This is why this is called Heaven Opening Day. They opened the gates, and his son went down to that mountain. The son of the Lord of Heaven coming to earth. Sounds a little bit familiar, yes? But this guy was very, very different. Not the Jesus story. This guy brought 3,000 followers with him. He had 3,000. It was an army. And back then, we're talking 2000 BC, 3,000 men would be a really big army. That's a big power, and so you brought troops with him. He wasn't going to get sacrificed. He had armed power, and he came down as a king to the peak of that mountain, a spiritual king. He marshaled, got military generals of the wind, the rain, and the clouds. Always three things in Korean, 3,000 followers. He came with 3 heavenly seals or stamp and 3 army generals, the wind, the rain, and the clouds. You can imagine swirling around this giant mountain. Those were his military force, 3,000 followers. Think of them like kind of angels or such. He settled there and he established a spiritual city. And his purpose, as he said, the purpose why he came down from heaven is Hongik Ingan. Hongik Ingan, which means to benefit humanity. To bring benevolence, to bring help and benefit to the human race. Hongik Ingan. Now, that's a very then important phrase in Korean culture by now. Hongik University. You might have heard of Hongdae Ipgu, the play where all the hip youngsters, nightclubs, stuff, they don't even allow me to come there. Block me right up the subway station. It's only for the young and the hip and the underground. The Hongik University is named for this, Hongik Ingan. So it's tied to this story. It's very strange that it's the disco capital of Korea now. Doesn't make sense. But anyway, that's why he came to Earth. This is regarded in itself as the very origin of Korean political philosophy. Then, the reason for government. Why do we have a government? Why is there a king? It's to bring benefit to the people, to make the people's life better. And Koreans are very serious about this. If the king is making the people's life better, then he is really a king, and he's a good king. This ties into Chinese Confucianism philosophy, same thing. If the king is not, if the people's life is getting worse, he's not a good king. He's not even really a king at all. He's just a robber, a thief, illegitimate. And if times get bad, when there's economic bad times, the people rebel and they kick out the king. This just happened to President Park 2 years ago. As you may know, she was not benefiting the people. It was judged by the people themselves. She was not benefiting the nation. Things were not getting better, and they rebelled and drove her out of office through that. The technical details don't matter. The prosecutors are still trying to figure out exactly what she did that was criminal, but they've got her in jail, and they're keeping her there. But it's just she was a failure. She did not benefit the nation. Notice this is not democracy. It's kind of what's called Asian democracy or Oriental democracy, shared with China, Japan and such. It's not about voting and then respecting the results of the voting. It's the popular will. People want in there, Park was elected for 5 years, legally, constitutionally, but no, they kicked her out because she was not benefiting the people. China very much has this. The Communist Party of China right now is very popular. Emperor Xi, as we know, very popular. Chinese people love him, and there's no real movement for democracy in China. Very, very little. No big demonstration. Nobody's demanding elections or democracy as long as the Chinese economy keeps getting better, keeps growing every year. The people are benefiting. If the Chinese economy goes down, like America did in 2008, something, if there's a collapse in China, you will quickly see that Emperor Xi is not popular anymore, and the will of the people will be expressed. This is their kind of way of doing this. This is the very beginning. Hongyi Ginga, the reason that the Son of the Lord of Heaven came to the Grand White Mountain to benefit humanity through government. What this really means, these were Bronze Age people coming into this area on horses. There were Stone Age people here. This peninsula used to have Stone Age people on it, gathered around the rivers and all through Manchuria. There were Stone Age people. They don't exist anymore. There's no trace of them. They, we say very polite terms, they were displaced. Like kind of when my ancestors came to the USA and there were native people living there, you know, and that kind of, they went away. And here also, they went away. In America, we know exactly what happened, and we feel real guilty about it. Koreans have no idea what happened. There are no records of what happened, but basically the same thing. Those people were killed. They were Stone Age people, but this idea of the Bronze Age people coming in, feeling advanced and superior, the true human, and the Stone Age people, and the idea of bringing benefit. We will make a government. We will create a state here and raise these people up. Unfortunately, they probably all died of viruses and such before they could benefit. But that's the idea. That's what really happened. But this myth that I'm telling you is the only record we have of what happened to the Stone Age people who were originally here. The only single story about this. So, he makes spiritual city, and he organizes a Bronze Age kind of government. It said that he had 360 departments of government. See, that's 1 year. 365 days, and 5 days is holiday. In the old days, 5 days was 1 week. They had weeks of 5 days, 6 in every month. And 360 days otherwise were working, and each day had a topic: agriculture, children's education, metalworking, rice growing, food storage, and kimchi making, and whatever. Each day had a different topic. This kind of makes sense. It's kind of a very primitive kind of government. Something for the leader to discuss with the tribe on each day. That's what the myth says. Now, then, a bear and a tiger came to this mountain, came to the Holy Lord on the peak of the mountain and said they want to be human beings. This is weird. This always struck me as strange. If you're a tiger, wouldn't you want to be a tiger? I mean, human beings, they got to go to school, they got to get a job, you got to get married and, you know, have responsibility. Tigers have a great life. You're running on the mountain, eating deer. You have your freedom. I'd really rather be a tiger myself in the old days. But the bear and the tiger, they want to be human beings. And so he granted, and he said, but I give you a test. Only one of you can become a human being. Only one. And I give you a test. You stay in the cave. Stay in the cave, out of the sunlight. Don't see any sunlight for 100 days. 100 days, and you eat this mixture I have of mugwort and garlic. Koreans say manul and soup. Mugwort, like we used to make beer, hops, and such, and which is a medicinal herb, and garlic, you know, is good medicine. And you give them that. Now, what is this? What is this? What does this mean? What do you think this means? The bear and the tiger were representing different Stone Age tribes. The Stone Age peoples, as far as we know, they tend to have totems of like their main food supply. There were the people on the coast who caught fish all the time. They're the fish people, and they worshiped the fish spirit. The ones who caught birds and ducks and geese and would trade with the other tribe. Then they were called the duck people, the geese people, whatever. And then those who were hunting bears in the mountains, the bear tribe, the bear people, and those hunting tigers. Now these would be the strongest people, the toughest, you must think, the men of such tribe. The hunting tigers as a Stone Age with like just a spear, it's really a 50-50 chance there. And very extremely difficult. These would be tough guys, hard guys, bear hunters, tiger hunters. They came to the Bronze Age Lord saying, we want to be human beings, meaning to be Bronze Age. Because the Bronze Age people, they think we are the human beings. You know, we're human. These Stone Age people, they're like animals. And they would be treating them as animals, probably just enslaving them when they encountered them, making them slaves. Now imagine the bear people, the tiger people, they come and they say, we don't want to be slaves. We're not going to be slaves. We can be soldiers. We can fight with you. We're tough. We're strong. We can kill tigers. And we want to join you. We'll be part of your army. We'll join you. So the bear and the tiger, they want to be human. This is what it means. He gives them 100 days in the cave. What's 100 days? Happens to be exactly the length of a Korean winter. Winter here is like 3 months long, plus a little more. From December through about the middle of March. That's winter. So 100 days, that fits. 100 days of winter. And bears, you know, bears sleep in the cave in winter. They get fat. They gather fat all during the summer and fall, and then they live on the fat, sleeping in the cave. Tigers don't. Tigers are out hunting in the mountains, even in wintertime. They catch deer and rabbits. So, he told him to do this, and he gave him this mixture, mugwort and garlic. We think that's the first kimchi. First kimchi. Now think about it. They didn't have red pepper back then. Red pepper only came here 300 years ago. It's not a traditional Korean thing. So nothing to do with that. But in Siberia, the winter is 6 months long. And this is where Koreans come from. 6 months of winter. The only way to live is you have dried meat, dried fish. And you got to spend all winter just chewing on dried meat, dried fish. Think of how difficult that is and how that wears out. Whatever. Having pickles. They develop pickled vegetables with salt. Vegetables in pickled state, maybe fruit, to eat together with the dried meat. Dried fish, so that you can eat it, so you can chew it and digest it. Pickles. They developed this in Siberia. They brought this down. Probably mugwort and garlic as a mixture. It's medicine. It's very bitter. Medicine probably against the Siberian winter, catching cold, catching the flu. This is probably a good medicine for them. So holy, sacred mixture, the first kimchi. So he tells them, stay in the cave 100 days in the cave and eat this. That's our special, and it tastes terrible. Think about it, mugwort and garlic. Tastes terrible, very bitter. But if you can eat this for 100 days, you can be one of us. Now, according to the myth, the tiger failed. The tiger gave up in frustration and ran out of the cave. Couldn't do it. The bear stayed in the cave and ate the kimchi and did it. And the bear became a beautiful young woman. Human woman. The bear was transformed into a young woman. And then 21 days later, after 21 days, she was accepted by the Lord of Heaven. Now, what does this mean? 21 days, that's the time in between a woman's menstruation. And back then, in the old days, when they wanted to see if a woman is pregnant or not, you just keep her in isolation for 21 days, from one period to the next period. Then when she gets her period again, you know that she's not pregnant. That was the only way in the old days to tell if a woman is pregnant or not. So if she's not pregnant, then she's eligible to be married. Still a virgin. Okay, that explained that. 21 days later, she went, this bear woman, this woman who used to be, said she had no husband, which is kind of understandable if a woman used to be a bear. Not too many men are going to be so much wanting to date her. Suspicious back. Sounds dangerous. So she went to the peak of the mountain after 21 days, goes to the peak of the mountain and is praying at the altar, stone altar on the peak of the Grand White Mountain, praying to have a son, which is what traditionally all Korean women wanted to have a son. It's a big thing under Confucianism, yes. Now, praying to have a son. Then it says, the Lord of heaven transformed himself, the son of the Lord of heaven, remember, heavenly son, he transforms himself into a human man, human form, and mated with her. Now, this is just a one-time thing. If you read the Koreans, the Korean government or whatever recounting this myth, they will tell you, they say they got married. They got married and lived happily ever afterwards. That's not the story. The original story just says they got it on one time, and then the guy returned to spiritual form as a ghost, or whatever, as men often do in such cases. There was no marriage back then. We're talking 2000 BC. There wasn't any such thing as marriage. There wasn't any such thing as a king either. There were no kingdoms. That's how we know this was a myth. Anyway, she got pregnant from this, and 9 months later, we assume, she gave birth to a baby boy. That's the boy we're seeing today, the paintings, the statue, the images here. His name is Dangun, which means gun is a very old-fashioned kind of word for king. It meant like really a tribal chief. It's still used today, meaning kind of a lower-level king, a bad king, or a primitive king. Gun. But that Dan is altar, the stone altar. Remember where his mother was praying to have a son, altar on the peak of the mountain, the stone altar that's now on Taebaeksan Mountain here in South Korea, very much. He is Dangun, king of the altar, kind of a primitive Bronze Age king of the altar, meaning a spiritual shamanism worshipping idea. Okay. Then the myth finally gives a date, and it says, at this time, 2333 BC, on October 3rd, the third day of the 10th moon, originally, and some Korean traditionalists still celebrate this holiday right now. They do celebrate on the third day of the 10th moon on the lunar calendar. Some of them really insist on doing that. The modern government of Korea, 1948, set it on solar calendar, American calendar, October 3rd, which is why we have this national holiday today. But it's the third day of the 10th moon. That on that day, that Dangun established a kingdom, the first Korean kingdom, Gojoseon it's called. Joseon. Joseon means human land. Again, Bronze Age people, whatever, land of the human beings, kingdom of the humans, Joseon. Joseon, the original meaning, and Gojoseon, go means ancient. So Koreans call it ancient Joseon. Such, this led to the Joseon dynasty, later being named Joseon, although it's different Chinese characters, but the same pronunciation. But different Chinese characters has a different meaning. Okay, but he founded this kingdom called Gojoseon. Now, according to Korean myth, this Gojoseon covered all of what is today Manchuria, all of Manchuria, the 4 provinces of China, and southern Siberia, southeastern Siberia, into Mongolia, and all the way down to Beijing area, encompassing Beijing city. That much territory was Gojoseon. Koreans publish maps about this. You can see maps online. You can buy a copy of the map downtown at a bookstore that'll show you the territory of Gojoseon. They do this just to make the Chinese angry. The Chinese really hate this, especially including Beijing, of course, within their territory. The Chinese also publish maps showing ancient China, that Korea was originally part of China, that all of Korea part of China. They do the same thing to piss off the Koreans. And you should see what they publish in Tokyo. You can just imagine. Okay, they all play this game. But anyway, this thing, Gojoseon. Now, again, this is entirely mythical. There's no such thing as a Gojoseon kingdom, and so nothing that big. There were no kingdoms, there was no kings. There were tribes. There were Bronze Age tribes, and all the tribes were only about 1,000 people or so, and there was about 100 Proto-Korean tribes all through this area. We're talking about Manchuria to Mongolia to Siberia to this peninsula. There was 100 tribes.